All right, Robbie, feel free to go ahead and get started.
All right, for sure. Okay, well, welcome, guys. Second meeting for corporate strategy. So, as we talked about before, I'm Ravi. So we're gonna begin every meeting with our current events updates. But before we start that, this is just like a brief announcement for the dues. So we're gonna have, like we said last meeting, we're having $10 per semester dues. So my Venmo information is here if you guys just want to get the code or my name. I'll give you a second to get that. But the dues are going to be due at the end of the end of next meeting. So you'll have like 2 weeks for that, and I'll send some updates in the group just to remind you, so you can kind of have this meeting and the next one just to consider that and work with that. But yeah, and if you have any concerns about them, or if you need to reach out to me directly, please do so on GroupMe. But yeah, so anyway, the current events that we're going to do today, suggested by Cole, is the COVID-19 vaccine rollout and how it affects businesses. So just to start, if you guys, sorry, just the sharing bar is in the way here. Okay. Just like we did last time, if you text my full name 165 to 37607, you can vote in this little poll here, 1 through 5. But the question is, which U.S. state has the highest percentage of their available COVID vaccine doses administered to their population? So if you guys join the session here, you can vote which of the 5 states you think it would be. So I'll give you guys a second for that. But oh shoot, sorry about that. I hope I didn't reveal the results, but okay. Yeah, so it looks like we have New Mexico, which is actually completely correct. So right here is the top 3. We have New Mexico, North Dakota, and Wisconsin. And New Mexico has about 96% of their available doses administered, which is huge. So they have a very efficient way of administering their doses. And North Dakota and Wisconsin here round out the top 3. Let's see. Sorry, clicker is being a little slow. Okay. And of course, the state of interest is Indiana, which is actually doing really well. We're 6th right now, which is 86% efficiency. So just to move on with the federal plan here, I have like some important dates, which are the EUA authorizations. Basically, EUA stands for Emergency Use Authorization. And here are the dates. Like mid-December, we had Pfizer, which was authorized, and a week later, Moderna. And then very recently, Janssen, which is a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson, was authorized. So these emergency use authorizations basically exist because we're in a pandemic, and they help us get the vaccines. So essentially at the federal level, the vaccines are distributed to the states, and then following that, it's kind of up to states and local governments to decide. So as we saw with the top 3 and some of the state breakdowns, there's a huge discrepancy amongst states, which is kind of visualized in these 5 key factors here. So as you can see, the colors are kind of regionally based, which is an important thing. You could see, like the West over here. We have some Southeast activity. So the 5 factors, the first one is like historic under vaccination, basically meaning, relatively easy ways to get exemption from vaccines, and also kind of a culture where people want to be exempt from vaccines. And you can see some barriers here. So we have like accessibility to healthcare, which you can see kind of concentrated here in the Southeast, and then the socioeconomically disadvantaged kind of have a lack of access to information, and then behaviors in which people kind of fail to seek their routine care. They don't have a personal doctor. And then you can see some like very low population density states here have very resource constrained healthcare systems. It's kind of hard for them to have the infrastructure for efficient distribution. So you may be asking, I know I was wondering this, what the role of big tech is here, right? So we have like Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft, which are just, huge companies, huge organizations, right? We can have like Amazon can deliver Prime orders in 2 days, and and these companies employ well over 1 million people. They have distribution channels already set, and they're obviously very efficient. So where do they kind of come into play with this vaccine stuff? So because Jake's going to be going over consulting, and I'll let him go into this into more depth. The big thing here is managing what are called synergies. So when you have two entities coming together in the world of business, either for the short term or the long term, you have to consider synergies, which are like company culture, and the overlap with a lot of things, either temporarily or in the long term. So here you have these big tech corporations that are forced to come together with the federal government, states, and even more local governments. So there's a lot that comes into play when considering managing these synergies. So just secondly, with the companies that are they're incentivized to promote. So as you can see here, like Walmart, NFL, and the sports world in general, Uber, and transportation as a whole obviously lost like a lot of revenue, right? They lost a lot of business because of the nature of the pandemic. So they're incentivized to promote the vaccines and offer up their capacities to promote vaccination, because that's going to make up for their lost business, right? So as we saw in a previous slide, a lot of the problems in the rollout kind of sourced from knowledge culture, right? So that could be political leanings, or maybe not as much belief in vaccines, or maybe their efficiency. So in a sense, when we have big corporations kind of stepping up and using their resources tangibly, we can improve the rollout and improve the efficiency. But there's also an intangible sense here, right? Because of the problems of the rollout being a lot of knowledge cultural issues, these corporations can kind of rally the knowledge and throw their support behind it. So as you can see here, like we had, Walmart used its facilities to administer well over 500,000 doses by now. And big venues like the NFL has stadiums, obviously Yankee Stadium, Disneyland have used their venues. We have Target that's offering paid time off, and Uber and Lyft that are offering free rides for people to get their vaccines. So, the companies are incentivized to promote for their lost business, but as you can kind of see, they can use their capacity for that, and it's an interesting strategy that they're putting forth, because it takes, they're obviously investing resources and money into this when they're already kind of suffering a loss of revenue, but there's a huge potential for their future profits, and they recognize if they can kind of iron out the vaccine rollout issues, both in a tangible and intangible sense, it'll help a lot. So, Cole's going to talk about consulting and a case overview, so I'll let him proceed with that. But it's important to notice that it ties in a lot here. And yeah, so that was our current events update, but I'll let Jake take it from here. So
Thanks, Robbie. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Will, can you let me know if this works? Because I know we had some problems last time.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. All right, well, Robbie, thank you for doing that current event. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm very excited to present. So let's begin. So today I'm going to be going over what is consulting, and I'm sure you've probably heard the word consulting before, but really don't know what it means. That's very possible. And you also may have heard of a case interview. But again, what does that mean? And the two you're going to see are heavily correlated. However, there are differences. You're going to see how consulting and case interviews work together. However, case interviews are used in a multiple amount of industries today, but they're most relevant to the consulting industry. So first, what is consulting? And before we dive into this, I want to give some people a chance to speak on what they think it is. So I want to ask, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of consulting? What the definition is, a stereotypical consultant. So don't use your phone to look anything up, don't use the internet, but I want to ask for 3 volunteers what you guys think consulting is, because I know my freshman year I had no clue. So 3 people want to volunteer, or else I'm going to cold call.
Giving advice.
Hello. Oh, my bad.
No, you're good. Giving advice, that's a good start.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, what I think consulting is, when someone asks another person or hires another person to give them wisdom and advice about a specific decision or maybe connection that they want to make either in the future or for right now.
Yeah, that's a great definition. One more person.
When a consultant comes in to fix a problem that another company is having.
Exactly. So you guys all three hit pretty much on the head. Consulting, the general definition is people who are engaged in the business of giving expert advice to people working in a specific field. So obviously that's a super general definition. A little bit more specifically, they have expertise. They have some level of expertise that a group of people find valuable and are willing to pay for their knowledge and intelligence on that specific subject. So notice how I didn't say anything about big firms. I didn't say anything about, a degree. If you can provide expert advice to a specific group of people, you are by nature a consultant. And so, where does this super broad industry take us? Well, we talked about what a real consultant is, but there's a lot of stereotypes surrounding consultants. And one of the biggest ones I'm sure you've heard is that consultants make a lot of money. They charge outrageous fees, and it's just based off of they have the supply of the knowledge and people demand their knowledge. So the average consultant at a college can make anywhere from 75,000 to over 100,000. It's possible. Another thing you probably heard is consultants travel. They work a lot. They travel to big cities, New York, LA, Chicago. For example, you might be hopping on a plane Monday to New York, and then you'd be back in Chicago that same week. So, they're flying all the time. And obviously this is much more in a pre-COVID world. And obviously the pandemic will have longer term implications on travel with the upsurge in Zoom, Teams, as companies realize, they can do almost as much, if not the same thing, and cutting back on their traveling expenses, which is huge. So that could have a long-term implication in the future. And finally, to no one's surprise, consultants heavily use Microsoft PowerPoint. It's probably their favorite tool.
That one's real.
Cole
Seriously,
can speak
like
of
that.
one.
There's a buddy of mine at Deloitte who's like a junior manager. We have probably a deck of about like 150 different blank PowerPoints that you can choose from.
It's
based on the situation. You get very good at making PowerPoints. Yeah.
So in a broad sense, I'm going to go over 8 quick things that consultants do. So number 1, they provide information to clients. We talked about that. So for example, a consultant may conduct an industry analysis of a competitor for a client. Number 2, they solve clients' problems. So they may be asked whether or not to enter a new market. Number 3, they make diagnosis. So the consultant may label an issue that it sees within a company to begin some sort of a solution. Number 4, they make recommendations. So they make a written or an oral report or a presentation to its clients. Number 5, they assist with implementation of solutions. So they might help a client implement a new system. Number 6, they build consensus and commitment to solutions. So they may present to a client's board of directors to get backing on a solution. Number 7, they facilitate client learning. So they may come in and recommend some sort of course or training before leaving the project to help them get started. And number 8, they permanently improve organizational effectiveness. They may design a whole new system around organizational productivity. So consultants do a lot, but the real question is, why should I spend my money and hire a consultant in the first place? Well, there's 3 primary reasons. So every company, firm, or organization has goals and objectives. And that big left side bubble that says current state is where a company currently lies. And that gap between where a company currently lies and where they want to be, the desired state, is what a consultant can assist with. So what types of problems may arise that cause people to want a consultant? Well, number 1, they simply can't get there on their own. There's not enough knowledge that the company has to get there on their own. And I like to compare this to, think about someone who's trying to lose weight or get into shape. You may do all the fad diets, you may go to the gym, work different workouts. You're just not going to get there sometimes unless you get a personal trainer, for example. So they need that missing link to really help them get there. Another reason why, in the business world, everyone knows time is money, and companies simply don't have time and are willing to pay a premium to accomplish things faster. So this ties into the idea of a comparative advantage where everyone is able to accomplish more if we specialize. I'm sure you've heard this in economics, specialize in trade. So for example, if you're a business and you're trying to do everything on your own or learn everything internally, you're giving up valuable time you could spend on your revenue driver. or a product that brings in the profits. And then that means that companies are thus willing to pay a premium as their opportunity costs are very high, trying to figure everything out on their own, and they'll have a consultant come in and do stuff for them. So like I said, a consultant specializes in a certain field, and then they're able to help others with their services while the company can focus on its special ability or its comparative advantage. And finally, consulting firms have been around for over 100 years. Companies simply want a proven system that works. Okay, they have systems and procedures. And like I said, time is money. Companies don't have time, nor, they don't want to have to guess and experiment. They want something that works. And it's kind of this mentality, been there, done that. So to review, people hire consultancy firms, 3 primary reasons. Number 1, they can't get there on their own. Number 2, they want to get there faster. And number 3, they want a proven system that works. Now, Cole can help me with this one, but there's a lot of consultancy firms in the world. There's actually over 700,000 to be precise. And you can break them down into a lot of different segments or categories. I'm going to do it a way that probably you wouldn't recommend or probably you wouldn't see normally, because most people break it down by the industries they work in, I'd say. But for our purposes, we'll look at 4 groups, and I'll let Cole speak on that a little bit. If you guys didn't know, Cole's going to Deloitte for consulting. So number 1, we're going to look at the big 3, which are management consultant firms. These are the upper echelon, like the firms that everyone goes crazy over, and they're management consultancy firms. Number 2 is the big 4, which are primarily accounting firms, and they have consultancy branches that they add on to. Number 3, I'm just going to break down larger and smaller firms. So larger firms, again, these span across all industries. So that first one, for example, is Accenture, and there's Booz Allen Hamilton, A.T. Kearney. And finally, there are boutique firms, which just really spans every industry as well. So for example, there's a firm like Protiviti or Huron, Gardner, or FTI Consulting. So Cole, you might want to speak on this, but there's a lot of different ways you can break it down. Some do strategy consulting, which I'll get to. Some do personal consulting. Some do IT consulting.
I guess I can kind of break down a lot of these really quickly. McKinsey kind of does everything. I think BCG kind of does everything. Bain mostly does financial consulting. KPMG, all the big 4 really kind of do everything with different variations. Deloitte may buy Bain. So Bain may no longer exist because they've done some of that stuff in the past. But I think they were considering that, but that didn't end up happening. Accenture does a lot of stuff, especially international projects. Booz Allen is pretty much like only a defense. Like they do defense and intelligence contracting. I know a couple of guys that work there. Kearney, I don't really know. I don't really know anyone that works there. I think there's a girl named Jasmine Kim, who's a junior that's working there. And then a bunch of these other ones are kind of like smaller firms. They just kind of like do a bunch of different stuff. I can't really speak to any of those, but I mean, there's a lot of different ones. Some of the ones that aren't really listed specifically focus on like engineering or like skills that companies don't really have that they just can't hire people. So what they do is they have these consulting firms that hire a bunch of these people, but then they just charge like ridiculous rates to basically put them in all these companies for like somewhat like extended contracts. Like Booz Allen does a lot of that with like the defense intelligence agencies, and like the company Slalom that gave me a Patagonia, they do a lot of that. But like for other like technology or like industrial firms, there's a ton of them. But it's really just like, if you go to a big 4, they kind of just do it all.
Yeah.
So you can really find everything there. But really, I mean, but aside from pay, I mean, a lot of them kind of pay the same. Like maybe I think some of the big 3 ones you can make a little bit more, but it's kind of based on like where you go. I know Deloitte pays literally everyone the same across the country, which is very weird because if you're in New York or San Francisco, you make the same thing that you do in Chicago, which frustrates the hell out of a lot of people in San Francisco and New York. It makes it like they basically can't hire anyone in San Francisco. So that's one of the nice things about Deloitte, and I think they pay a little bit. Like Deloitte basically pays what I think BCG and Bain pay, maybe like not the bonus structure, but I think they pay better than all the big 4. Yeah,
that makes sense because I mean,
other than that, I mean it's everything else. It's anything like technology though it follows pretty standard or a little bit higher tech pay. So that's my thoughts on that.
Thank you. So now you may be asking, what does it take to become a consultant? And to be a consultant, there's two primary ways I break it down. You need both hard skills, which is Microsoft Excel, which you'll learn in K303 and K201. Like Cole said, and I said earlier, you definitely need PowerPoint skills, Word, a good understanding of accounting and financial terms, modeling skills, presentation skills, confidence, statistical skills, all of which you learn in Kelly. And this is why you go to college, to invest in yourself. But in addition, to be a consultant, you really need those soft skills as well. Creative thinking, problem solving, communication, organization, leadership, adaptability. And the consulting industry really isn't for everybody. Many people aren't comfortable giving big presentations to clients. Many people aren't comfortable with the ambiguity and the constant pressure because it's a very high pressured job. But the ultimate decision, is yours. But I highly recommend looking at those hard and soft skills because those are very important when you're going to be interviewing if you want a consulting type of job. And so obviously, I mentioned strategy consulting and management consulting. There are many different industries you can work in as a consultant, and this is not a comprehensive list, but I'm going to go over 8 of the primary ones and just go over an example of what kind of companies they might work with. But again, this is not exhaustive. So number 1, there's environmental consultants who may work with energy and utility companies. Number 2, we have financial consultants, which is kind of like Bain, who may work with banks and private equity companies. Number 3, HR consultants, human resources, if you don't know what HR is, who may work with like headhunting companies, for example. Number 4, IT or cloud consultants, who may work with software companies, engineering companies, along those lines. Number 5, management consultants, who may work with technology. 6, there are people who are personal consultants who really are like independent contractors to a degree who may work as kind of a sole proprietor. Number 7, there's operations consultants who may work with supply chain companies. And number 8, there's strategy consultants who may work with healthcare companies. Again, not an exhaustive list, many other branches and companies that each type of industry could fall in. But this is also cool to understand because consulting really hits every industry in business. So even if you really don't know what you want to do, going into consulting gives you that wide range of opportunities you may not get elsewhere if you want to go into being a banker or being, a financial analyst. So now that we've really reviewed the consulting industry, the next step is to ask the question, how do I get into consulting? We talked about the hard and the soft skills that are required to do well as a consultant, but this is not really a one-size-fits-all answer. It's a very competitive industry. For example, the big 3 that I mentioned earlier, maybe 5 to 6 Kelly kids a year go to those companies. So it's very competitive.
It's higher than that, actually.
This year was better.
This year was probably, I think, the best year on record. No, I think we sent 8 kids to Bain.
We sent 6 kids to Bain. We sent 2 to BCG, and we sent, I think, 3 to McKinsey. It was a very good year for Kelly.
I only know 2 of them, but
but no matter what you try, no matter what you do to get into consulting, you will inevitably run into what's called the case interview, which is the second half of this presentation. So the case interview is one of the biggest hurdles to landing a job as a consultant for any firm. And referencing from the beginning of the presentation, case interviews are popping up everywhere. They're not just in consulting, however, they're very prominent in consulting. So let's dive into it. Just like we started, what is consulting? What is a case interview? So as the name implies, a case interview is a hypothetical business situation that is presented during an interview process, and it's really to determine how a candidate thinks about a particular problem and how they would solve it. And that last part is very important, so I'll say it again. The primary objective of a case interview is to see how the interviewee thinks and structures their thoughts. So you might hear there's no right answers for a case interview. That's not entirely true. There are ways there are answers that are better than others, but their idea is not to see that you're going to get the best answer. It's to see how you think and structure your thoughts. And so what a case interview does is it's supposed to replicate a 3 to 6 month project that a consultant may work on all in 30 to 45 minutes of an interview. So let's talk about the different types of case interviews. Number 1, there's the classical 101, which is by far the most common. You'll run into these, anytime you go and probably for a job. Number 2 is the group case interview, which is kind of meant to simulate how you interact within a team setting. Are you a team player? Are you a leader? Are you a follower? Do you take action? Do you take initiative, or kind of do you sit back, etc.? Number 3, there's written case interviews that kind of demonstrate your ability to write and creatively think. And finally, you might be asked a hypothetical situation, and you might be asked to create a couple slides like PowerPoint to present to the quote unquote CEO, who's your interviewer at the time. The most prominent and the most one you'll see often is the 101. So that's what we're going to focus on. And you may also be wondering, how is this different from a behavioral interview or a technical interview? Well, a behavioral interview is focused on showcasing your softer skills, like your interpersonal leadership skills. And behavioral interviews are much more often first round interviews and are used as kind of a screening process to decide who may even get a case interview. So types of questions you might see are, tell me about a time you worked with a tough coworker. Tell me about a time you exhibited leadership skills. Those kinds of questions you are more likely to see as opposed to a case interview. Your answers are often more presented in a star-like fashion, which you'll learn encompass situation, task, action, and result. What about technical interviews? Well, they're a little bit closer to case interviews in the sense that you're going to be doing more hard skills as opposed to soft skills. These are more often geared toward computer science, engineering, IT, or other technical professionals who need actually to have demanded hard skills on the job. So let's talk about the different types of cases that you may run into. Number one, there's profit and loss. And this is usually trying to help a company either increase its revenues or cut its costs to increase its profits and margins. Number two, there's market sizing, which is usually determining the size of a market and the potential buyers, and may be embedded in a larger question or could actually be a standalone question on its own. And we're going to go over two examples in breakout rooms in a little bit, as these are pretty easy and short to go over. Number three is entering a new market. And this is usually where we want to examine the company and the strategies, whether or not you want to enter this market. Number four, mergers and acquisitions. Will is going to be giving a presentation next week, a detailed overview about mergers and acquisitions. But the main question is, why should we buy this company? Should we invest in this company? Why or why not? And like Robbie mentioned in the current events, this kind of relates to synergies and how can you mesh together and utilize the company's strengths together. Next is price valuations, and that's usually trying to figure out how to price a new product. And this, again, may be embedded in a larger question or could be a standalone question. And finally, there is increasing growth and increasing sales. And this is usually trying to increase both of them as a result of them going flat. Again, this is not a comprehensive list. However, most cases fall within one of these two broader categories. So now that we understand the different types of cases, let's go over to market sizing questions. So we're going to look at two market sizing questions as they're shorter and a little bit easier to go over, and this will allow us to walk through the entire problem. So the first question we're going to go over is how many cups of coffee or coffee drinks are consumed in the US on a typical day? So before we go into breakout rooms, grab a piece of paper or take a picture of this. I want to give everybody about a minute or two to think about this answer. And like I said earlier, your goal is not to guess the answer, okay? You want to lay out a structure to how do you arrive to your answer and then plug in the numbers to get some sort of good answer. It's more important to show how you think than how you actually arrive at the answer. So again, how many cups of coffee or coffee drinks are consumed in the US on a typical day? So I'm going to create breakout rooms in a minute. Abby, you're still here, right? I have Cole, Abby, myself. Robbie, you're still here?
I can take as many people as you want.
Okay, I'm just going to assign automatically. All right, Abby. Okay, Abby's in that one. Okay. All right, I'm going to open these rooms and I will see you guys in a little bit. Spend about 3 to 4 minutes and use your executive number, okay?
Be able to back it up.
So how many people? Well, when's the last time you guys went to the Starbucks?
I don't usually go. Like I usually make coffee. I just have like an instant coffee thing. I'm trying to think of there's about 330 million US citizens.
It's a good start.
I'm trying to think of the approximate of let's go over 18.
Wait, is it fair to say 80% of adults drink alcohol? No, not alcohol, coffee, huh?
That's a good start. That's the assumptions you want to try and make the numbers easier. So you can make assumptions as long as you show the interviewer how you're making those assumptions.
I think that 80% is a bit high for coffee drinkers.
Yeah, that's what I would.
I've been a lot of coffee drinkers, but I don't drink coffee.
Yeah, I was thinking more like 65%.
Well, but even if it's 65%, how many people drink more than 1 cup a day?
That's another good point.
So, because everyone doesn't drink 1 cup a day. Let's say there's let's say there's 65, 70% people that drink coffee, but then 30% of those will drink 2 cups a day, and the other will only drink 1.
Yeah, so I would start with the population, see what percentage of the population drinks coffee on a daily basis, and then what's the average amount of coffees the usual person drinks. Then use that to kind of arrive at an answer. So let's say half the population drinks coffee, and the average person drinks 1.5 cups of coffee a day. Let's say there's 300 million people, you got 150 that drink coffee, 1.5. So what is that? 225 million cups of coffee a day, or whatever the question was.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a world or just US?
In the US.
Oh.
That's definitely.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like it might be a little high, just because you have to think the population skews younger as well. So there's probably more a higher rate of the population is under 18. They're not going to be drinking coffee as much. So.
Okay. Save everybody back. All right. So I'm gonna ask for one group. I'm not muted. Yeah, I'm not muted. I'm gonna ask for one group to share their thoughts on how they might arrive at this answer. So someone go ahead. Someone came to an answer.
Hopefully my group. I know we had some good thoughts. If you guys, if anyone wants to share, that'd be great.
So I can go. So we are group 1. So our estimate was about 250 million cups of coffee. So we first took 330 million Americans in the population, and we estimated that about half of all Americans drink coffee each day, or at least are coffee drinkers. And then taking that into account, we thought about how many cups of coffee an average American would drink each day. So there are definitely going to be some people on the far end who maybe only drink maybe once or twice a week. But then there are those who drink multiple cups a day, maybe 3 to 4. So we settled around 1.5 cups of coffee per day per American. Um, just because like that's kind of just the general average. So the official number from all those accounts was 247, which is about 250 million.
Yeah, that's a great way to go about it. So I'll go over the way that I would break this kind of a thing down. And like I said, there's multiple answers, multiple ways you can get to the same exact answer. So let's go over the way I did it. So the first thing that I do is I break down the population into subgroups. So kind of like you can see on the screen, you can break down and make general assumptions that there's an even distribution across the ages. So for example, there's the same amount of 2-year-olds as there are the same amount of 75-year-olds. And I'm going to assume, to make the math a little bit easier, the US population is about 320 million. So that means there's 80 million people in each age group. And then like you said, not everyone drinks coffee, of course. And if you break down the age groups to who drinks coffee, that's where you get to these types of numbers. So I assumed, from 0 to 20, really you're not starting to drink coffee until you're at least 15. So that wipes out about 3/4 of the age group alone. And then the rest of the age groups, 21 to 40-year-olds drink coffee, 41 to 60-year-olds drink coffee, and then elderly people drink coffee as well. So make some assumptions. As long as you can defend why you can make those assumptions, you can get there. So there I arrive at 200 million coffee drinkers in the US, which is about 63% of the US population. And you want to quantify as much as possible in consulting. So instead of saying it went up, $3, we can say it went up 20%. That's kind of what you want to try and do. So again, then you're going to split further. Like you said, there's people that drink coffee once a week. There's people that drink coffee every day, multiple times a day. So you want to try and think about how many people drink, how many cups each person drinks a day. And so again, use logical assumptions. You have light drinkers who may drink a cup a day, medium drinkers, 2 cups a day, and heavy drinkers drink 4 cups a day. And then again, break that down even further by the population. So I'll assume that about 1/4 of the people drink a cup of coffee a day. That's your average standard person. Medium drinkers, maybe college students, maybe parents who have busy jobs. And then you can really drink heavy drinkers like the investment bankers, consultants, people that need that coffee all day long, about 25% more. And then from there, you can multiply based off of the population percentage to figure out the total cups of coffee. And so from there, I arrive at my answer, which is 450 million. Now, you got 250 million, I think it was. So it could be 100 million off. My process is all they care about. They don't care about the actual number. As long as you don't say 7 billion cups of coffee for 7 billion people in the world, they really don't care about the actual answer, because you're not supposed to get the right answer. Really is no right answer. You really can't tell. As long as you walk your interviewer through your breakdown, right? That's what you want to try and do. So does anybody have any questions about how I kind of went through that process? I know it was very quick and I made a lot of assumptions, but that's kind of what you have to do in that kind of a situation.
So in an interview like this, would you be able to ask for a piece of paper, or are you just kind of expected to work through this in your head?
Yes, you have a piece of paper present, and I can kind of explain a little bit if you have follow-up questions about how you break down your note structure, but you bring a piece of paper.
Yeah, I just want to interject there. Actually, funny enough, we got the same exact final answer, even though I had no idea you did this math. It's completely different, like literally the exact same answer.
This is why Cole's a
this is
consultant, guys.
I know. Actually, I thought it was pretty gangster math on my part. But what was I gonna say? I think this is a problem where I guarantee you, when I was a freshman, I was like, why the hell would I need to know like how to do something like this? But this isn't a perfect example of a problem that you get in a case interview, because although they might not just like ask you like how many people drink coffee, you may find that you get a slide deck of like 10 to 15 different slides, depending on the case. Sometimes it's even like, just 4 or 5. But then you have to do like 1 or 2 or 3 of these calculations and then use the numbers to actually bring them together to then get some like composite answer based off of all that stuff. So then like, they'll take your answer, but then they'll break the different parts down, and then sometimes they'll change some information or do something else. Usually it's more stressful than this. This is like a very simple thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think something like this isn't even like as far as like, if there were 3 levels of consulting case interviews, this is like 0.5.
Yeah,
so,
no, this is meant to be a very basic, I'm going to show you guys a video at the end, or I'll send it to you guys because I'm probably not going to watch the whole video, but A real case interview, like I said, takes about 30 minutes to do or 40 minutes to do. This is meant to be a smaller question that actually might be embedded in a larger case interview itself. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, in general, I mean, when I was prepping people for like Deloitte case interviews, I think we spent probably like an hour or two just doing like mental like math sometimes, just so like, for example, like multiplying and dividing fractions like on paper. It's something like, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like decimals even, like how do you multiply or like divide a decimal?
It's
something that
crucial
you should
because
like
if
know
you're
how to do.
multiplying, yeah, that's exactly
because
right.
I feel like a lot of the people, especially the people that did not get the Deloitte jobs this past year, a lot of them got stuck midway through the case because they could not work through the math. It's not like the math is hard, but you know, like you should be able to like divide, you know, 12.5 by like 3, like multiply it by like 0.4. Like it's something like, you know, it's like simple, you know, root fractions like that I think like make a big difference. 12.5 is like 1/8. So
yeah,
so you know you know, it's just know some stuff like that. It's not like don't get scared by it, but at the same time, if you're really bored by this is like if we were to show you like a real like the Diconsa case, then like you would start to see how like where this stuff actually like fits in.
Yeah.
Stuff.
To build off of his point, you know, this is a little bit dry in sense of that it's not going to be lively. And if you watch a real case interview, it's going to be much more pulling in economic factors and pulling in factors about the company, pulling in factors about the market you're dealing with. But math is very important because if you're multiplying 10,000 by 10,000 and you get 100 billion instead of 100 million, you know, you have to be able to work quickly with math and decimals and fractions like Cole said. So let's go over one more case. This may come a little bit easier now that we've seen one. But you know, last time I kind of just threw you into the fire. I'll give you some basic assumptions this time, which may help. So just like last time, market sizing, we'll do one more. How many televisions are there in the United States? Okay, so again, you know, grab a piece of paper or take a picture of this. I'm going to send you out into breakout rooms. Spend 3 to 4 minutes. Try and come up with some sort of structure that you can present when you come back. Remember, no right answers. Your goal is not to guess the right answer. Lay out your structure, plug in the numbers. So some basic assumptions that may help, that help me arrive at this answer. So kind of like how I assume there's 320 million people in the US population, I assume there are 100 million households in the US. That's one kind of assumption you might want to consider when making your answer. All right, so let's move into breakout rooms and we'll spend about 5 more minutes.
So he said like assume like there's 100,000 household, or what was it, 100 million households?
100 million households.
So let's assume there's 100 million households, and each household has an average of, let's say like 2 TVs. So I would say like in their like main room, and then probably one somewhere else in the house.
Let me stop you right there. I want to challenge you to try and dive a little bit deeper. You're going very high level generalization there.
Okay.
You know, not every household has 2 TVs. Some households have 50, some households have 0, some households have 1. So you have to try and break down so you can plug in specific numbers. So for example, you could break down the population into subgroups. Very wealthy people, like high class, middle class, low class, and then assign, you know, TVs. You don't want to just say that there's an average of 2 TVs per household because it's a sweeping generalization.
Okay.
Question: Do we consider projectors as TVs?
No, not projectors, just real, you know, screen TVs.
A lot of people have, okay, so yeah. I mean, only from my personal experience of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 TVs, six TVs. So I have many TVs here.
And again, you don't want to, you know, in these types of questions, that's a good question. Like, are we considering projectors, TVs? They would tell you that, but you probably want to assume a generalist TV. You know, you don't want to try and be too picky about it, but a general TV is the way you want to do it.
Okay.
What are you thinking, Lucas?
So I'm trying to think of like maybe breaking down the population, well, households into like kind of income brackets, like making generalizations about like what is like lower class, middle class, and then upper class. Because I would say that like it would be somewhat safe to assume that in households that rely on the lower class will probably have about one TV per household. Middle class, let's say about 2 TVs per household. And then we can go with upper class. We can say average frequency of about 4 TVs per household. I'm just right now trying to think of like what would be an accurate representation of just like income brackets.
Yes, I was thinking about the same distribution that low income would have 1, middle would have 2. Another question that I have is, could we take house structure into consideration, like how many households live in apartments or how many households live in like a single family household? Because
Yeah,
I feel like different levels of floors would also determine how many TVs are there. Because if it is like just a simple like house with only 1 floor, they would probably only have 1 TV. But if we knew like how many houses were there, then we could probably plug in, chug in the numbers.
Of course, you can break down your structure in any way. That's a great way to think about it. I personally didn't go about that way, but that's a great way to think about it. So if you could plug in some sort of structure and then plug in numbers based off of that structure, that would be fantastic. All right, I'm going to leave the room and give you guys about 1 more minute, okay? Try and come up with an answer. Did you leave your breakout room early, Hayden? Oh, there we go. Okay, we're coming back.
Yeah, just a bit, I guess.
No worries. Okay. Looks like everyone's back. So I'm now going to ask again, just like last time, would one group please volunteer and explain, what was your solution? Robbie, someone from your group's got to do it.
Will Chen, you want to go? Calling you out a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So what our group came to conclusion was that first we knew that there's 100 million households in the U.S. and that approximately, possibly 30% can't afford televisions. So we multiplied that number by 0.7, and then we assumed that each household would approximately buy 2 televisions, and so we came to a number around 140 to 160 million.
That's a good way to do it. There's multiple ways you can do it. Anybody else want to share how their group did it?
Oh yeah, I can share. So we had 100 households. We broke it down into upper class, middle class, lower class. So upper class, let's say that was like 5% of people. They had like 6 TVs. Middle class was like 45% with 3 TVs, and lower was 50% with 1 TV. then that added up to 215 million TVs. But then we added like restaurant and bars and other businesses. So we assumed that there was like 1 million restaurants and bars with like approximately 15 TVs. That's kind of high, but so then that added 15 million. So then total of 230 million.
Yeah. Wow. That's actually the exact answer that I came to, 230 million. So let me explain. I did a very, very similar process to you guys. I broke down income status, high, middle, and low. Our numbers for the percentages was a little bit different. You know, I did 30% for high, middle percent was 50, low was 20. And then again, I just assigned a number of TVs. So I broke down the households, 30 million, 50 million, 20 million, based off of 100 million households, and then assigned number of TVs, got my total TV calculation. And then just like you guys said, I added non-household TVs, restaurants, bars, etc. So, you know, like I said, that 230 million could be 50 million off. Cole, what was your group's number? What'd you guys get at?
Well, I guess Will gave the answer that I gave, which wasn't quite exactly it. My range was 140 to 180, but I totally did not include like bars or anything. Yeah, that kind of just like went out of my. I mean, I went to a bar on like Friday, so I don't know why I'm not even like.
Yeah,
there's yeah, I kind of forgot about the rest of the world there for a second. But you know, I think the lesson here is not really like the answer, but the fact this is another thing that I kind of realized is the fact that like I came up with a range when I did it. So, you know, if you're not certain about the math or you know, you think there's like some variance in there, you can include a range, and I think it enables you to be, you know, less wrong or like more correct depending on what side of the range that you're on. But you know, I know like you know, Will gave an answer like no like you know the second answer that our group came up with. But you know, there's really like no one way to go about doing this, and really it's all about the process. And honestly, on this one, because I forgot about all the bars and like other restaurants and like everyone else that has TVs, like airports and all that stuff, I was really off. So, you know, this is an example where like, you know, just because I say it doesn't mean it's necessarily correct, and there's multiple ways of doing it. So, you know, I may not have been totally wrong, but there's definitely some stuff that I left out and you could have been more right.
Right. So like he's saying, there are no real right answers, and a range is a great idea because arriving at one single answer might be intimidating. You might think you're well off. So giving yourself kind of a cushion in a sense is a great idea. So as a recap, obviously this says one answer above each of these, the way that I structured mine. We've talked about this. There's multiple ways you can do it, but the key is your thought process. So the way you go about doing it. So now that, you know, we've kind of been through two quick, smaller examples, I just want to go over a couple of tips you guys can use to practice. If you're interested in pursuing more, we can talk about this later. Number one, ditch the calculator. You are not allowed to use those in an actual case interview. You need to, like we talked about, if your mental math is weak, practice and practice and practice some more. You need to be able to say that 20% of 90 is 18 in a matter of 3 seconds. You can't be trying to do calculations on the sheet that you have. Best tips that I would say for percentages, grab a bill, take 10%, find when 10% is, 15% is, 20%, 25%, like you're tipping a waiter. You can do that in a matter of seconds. It's very easy. Move the decimal, multiply by 2 to get 20%. That's a good way to do it for me. Practice tough multiplication. Like what's 10,000 times 10,000? Okay, it's 100, it's 100 million. You have to be able to know quickly and using those zeros that Cole talked about earlier. You also want to be able to learn to read graphs quickly. Speed of analysis, they're going to give you graphs. That's really key to be able to drive insights from the graphs. I talked about notes a little bit, but if you can look online, there's many ways you can organize your notes for a case interview, figure out what's best for you. If you get nerves like I do during most interviews, try to stay calm. I know it's very hard. It can be hard to reduce the butterflies. Don't ignore them because it's very real. But the best thing, if you can be excited about what you're doing, it usually calms your nerves. So if you're excited going into a case interview that you've done a lot and you're prepared and you think you're really excited for it, it's the best way to go about it. And finally, just practice. You know, there's no substituting. You'll learn this once you get sophomore, junior year. Practicing is the key to doing these if you want to get good at them. Some resources you can use. The UCS has mock interviews you can do. You guys don't have to do this as a freshman, obviously. If you're interested, do this as a junior probably. If you haven't seen already, this club, 180 Degrees Consulting, It's a great student organization that's centered around helping small businesses. They already took applications for the spring, but they recruit freshmen and sophomores, so you guys can do it next year if you're a freshman. It's fairly competitive, but it's a great experience. I read this book, Case in Point, very good. I was recommended to it by multiple consultants who work at multiple different industries. If you can, pick it up. It's like $25, read it. Summer going into sophomore or junior year. It's a great resource. Finally, work with your friends. A lot of people do case interviews together, so it's a really good way to do it. And lastly, watching case interviews online. I'm going to send one at the end of this, and you guys should definitely consider watching that. One last thing, just not to scare you guys, like Cole had said, case interviews are not going to be in your realm until at least junior year. So don't stress thinking you have to go out and spend 30 hours doing preparation for this in the next 5 months if you're serious about trying to do consulting. Begin slow, and then once you get to the more advanced stages, taking more advanced classes, you'll learn greater analysis, greater insight skills, and it'll get you better prepared.
Yeah. You want to go back to like 2 slides before? Oh wait, are we still going? Is that the end?
I'm about to be done. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just go after you're done.
Oh yeah. Last thing, if you're interested in consulting, I would highly recommend looking into applying to the consulting workshop. It's designated to familiarize students with the consulting field and prep them to kind of go into consulting realms and go into consulting industries and businesses. Anybody who's a Kelly student is available to apply, or a LAMP student, I believe, as long as they're not in another workshop. And if you're interested and want to hear more, you can reach out to me. I actually just applied. I hear back in April. So yeah, does anybody have any questions? I'll let Cole speak for a minute after. I want to run over time too. It's almost 9.
This is a workshop question. So you can't be part of like 2 workshops?
Yeah, you can only be a part of one. So for example, I know the freshman, there's the business operations consulting workshop. If you got into that and applied to that, if you got into it and you accepted that, you can't do any more workshops for the rest of your time at Kelly.
Okay.
Yeah, I to be honest, like if you're in a workshop, it's a lot of work. Like it's a lot of work. Like the banking workshop is like a 5-credit class.
Oh yeah.
Alone. So like Will can probably speak to that, but like, there's really no workshop that exists that like is gonna allow you to join anything else. Partially because like you're just not gonna have time. Like being in the workshops, especially if you're really active and you're doing what you should be doing in that one workshop, just isn't realistic. You really you want to go back like 2 slides. I should talk about some of this stuff because I think a lot of people want to know about it, but also a lot of blunders that you can make. Go back it's like 3 slides. It's like the first one on case interviewing. One before that. Yeah, this one. Or one before that. Wait, that's it. So first things first, analysis paralysis is a real thing. So get really good at taking notes. If you're gonna do case interviews, you really don't need to do them now. Honestly, you don't really even need to do them at the first half of sophomore year. It's really a second half of sophomore year, maybe summer, as you're starting up junior year. I think it's worth practicing, but it's not something there are some kids that just drill case comps like crazy. And I don't really think it's super necessary for everyone, unless you want to go work at McKinsey, in which case those case interviews are designed to slaughter you. But yeah, other than that, do them with friends, because you get so much more realization, and part of it's somebody else watching you, and watch your friends do case comps or case interviews, because you get the sense for how people interview and how they react under pressure. No matter how many case preps you do, you will never be totally prepared for the one that they give you. Things that I've done. I did actually argue with a Deloitte partner at my case interview. My final round Deloitte interview, they were asking me something about building a system versus deploying something that was already existing. And he said, let's deploy it. And I was like, no, that's a terrible idea. Or it was, let's build one. I was like, no, don't do that. That's horrible. We got in a 15-minute argument. If someone tells you, sometimes they'll try to steer you in different directions. You should go with that. I think sometimes they will try to screw with you. So you gotta kind of be aware of that too. It's not they're designed to be hard. They're designed so you will not necessarily get the right answer, or they're designed to try and trip you up in your logic, or get you to go back on things, or get to see where your faults are and stuff. So that's all stuff to be aware of. But the case interview is really, it's not necessarily reflective of the actual job. it's something that they use to interview people and to see how they think. But the reality is, like, when you're on the job, like, you get to use Google, you get to take your time doing stuff, you get to talk to people, you have a calculator, you have all kinds of other different resources. So the case interview when I was a freshman was kind of something that like scared the hell out of me. But to be honest, it's not. It's something to just be aware of. Don't be worried about it. And it's, if you don't like case interviewing, that's okay. I guarantee you'll like the job a lot more, especially depending on like where you go and they have different opportunities. But yeah, that's my opinion of it. I did argue with a door partner, and I'm pretty sure I was screwed.
It
But he
doesn't
ended up
surprise
hiring
me at
me.
all.
So
It doesn't surprise me at all.
yeah. So
All right. Well, I don't want to take too more of your time. It's 9:02. So I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions or want to follow up, this is my contact information, phone, email, and LinkedIn. And I'm also going to send a video in the chat. I'll keep this up for a minute. I'm going to send a link in the chat for about a 15-minute case interview if you want to watch it. It's kind of a much bigger, encompasses much more what we talked about today. And I'll send that now. So let me send this. If you're interested, grab that link and you can watch that. It's about 15 minutes. And feel free to follow up. So that wraps up the presentation, guys. Thank you so much for coming. And I'll stick around for a few minutes if anybody has any questions.